So before we start, I'll tell you who I am. I am Nitza Diaz. I am a consultant at CERC, and CERC State Education Resource Center. And I work in the special education team around family engagement, diversity and equity, and English learners. Those are my 3 big initiatives. So today we are here to talk about engaging families in the MTSS process. And what does MTSS stand for?
Multi-tiered support systems.
Say it again.
Multi-tiered support systems.
Did you get it right?
Yay.
Do you know if I had a sticker, I'll give it to you, but I don't. I'm sorry, I didn't bring any. So I'm going to ask my co-presenters to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denetra McBride. I work in an organization called FAVOR, which is the statewide family organization, and my role at FAVOR is the Director of Family Engagement Programming.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Beresford Wilson. Currently, I am the Executive Director of FAVOR.
So today, we might not show the components of MTSS if you are comfortable with them, right? We might show them as they relate to engaging families, right? Working with families. We are going to talk a little bit about what the challenges are of building the school and family partnerships and learn about practices. I don't like to use the word strategy because sometimes I feel that people come to a session and they say, well, she's just going to tell me what to do. Step 1, go and say hello. Step 2, Denetra, you're awesome. No, that's not what we want you to remember, right? We want you to remember that these are practices that we are going to embrace to ensure that all of our families are going to feel welcome. Because we know, and we said it in the presentation before, when we're talking about mental health or behavior, is this an easy thing to do, to talk about with families? Think about it. Like you making a phone call home, that might not be the best phone call, right?
And it's not easy for the families either to talk about it as well, so it's uncomfortable for everybody.
So we want to make sure that you know that this is a conversation from our perspective. We only have 1 hour, so we tried our best to make sure that we get to as many practices as possible. But please stop us and ask any questions. All right? So we're going to show you a video today. And before I do that, I do want you to remember these norms that we talk about, that we want you to fully engage in discussion. We want you to think about multiple perspectives, that we all have different perspectives when it comes to raising children, when it comes to talking about behavior, when it comes to partnering with families, right? We are going to have mindful listening. I realize it's 1:45, right? And you might be tired, although you were lively before. And we want you to ensure that we engage in everybody and that we challenge our ideas and perspectives. And that's okay. That's okay for us to do that.
We want to see who we have in the audience as far as
Sure, yeah.
how many teachers do we have in the audience? Any other support staff in schools? What are those positions?
School psychologists, counselors, social work. Oh, interesting, new position, community school director, I like that.
And parents, correct? Parents?
Families?
Parents?
I think, is anyone here, he's like, me too.
It's okay.
Anyone here that we don't know your role, that is kind of different from what we're used to seeing? No? All right. And a videographer. Who, by the way, remember me because he's like, I go to your church. And I was like, yes, I know. and he said, but he doesn't tell you that he's an author. This videographer is an awesome actor, people.
Wow.
He was like the main character in our Easter play. Just want you to know that. He was not a rabbit. Yes, you are.
Right. The rabbit.
I know, that's what I say too. Oh, there we go. No, I was like, no,
Well, Dylan was born on May 20th, 2011 at Gwinnett Medical Center. And he was 6 pounds, 4 ounces, and just a beautiful little baby. And he brought such joy to our lives. He met all of his milestones on time. So, therefore, when he didn't talk at 2, it wasn't a big issue. And as time progressed, I was like, I think I really need to look into this. I still did not think that special needs meant disability. I just thought that it meant that this was a need that your child has at this time, and then they work through it. The child's going to get through it. You don't think that this is a handicap. You don't see that in the beginning, especially when you don't even know what's going on. That's where I was in the beginning with special needs. I just still had so much hope in the beginning that he would go to school, and between me and the teacher getting that additional help, that he was going to talk. Dylan has been in special education classes and private speech therapy, and just during the process we decided to go ahead and get him tested so that we would know for sure how to continue on in the journey of how we could best help Dylan. So September 16th, of course you can never forget that day, is when I obtained the results. Autistic spectrum disorder is the official name, and there's 3 levels of autism, and he fell in the moderate to severe category, which was a shock to me. Of course, the initial shock, you're devastated, you're hurt. It's very challenging as a parent to parent a child with special needs, so even I get frustrated during the process. You'll hear family members, friends, and sometimes even strangers tell you that it's going to be okay. But they really don't know that it's going to be okay. You don't know that when you meet a person with special needs because you're not in that household. You don't know what the challenges are of dealing with a child with special needs. So the best thing to really do in that situation is to say, hey, I really don't understand what you're going through, but I'm there for you. That's the best thing that you can do for a family with special needs. Be there for them during the journey. We don't know what to do sometimes when those temper tantrums come and they fall out in the middle of the store, and you're super embarrassed because you don't want to explain to everybody, like, look, my child has a special need. Don't just look at me and condemn me because you think I should spank my child right here on the spot because they're having a temper tantrum. It's hard sometimes because in those moments you really want somebody more so to say, hey, how can I help you? Is everything okay? Versus being judged and being condemned in those moments. I do want Life Church.
So what did you see?
A mom who cares.
Mom who cares. What else?
Mom who needs support.
A mom who needs support. What else? What did she say?
What did she want?
What did she say? What did she say she needed? What did she want?
Don't condemn me.
Don't judge me, right? Don't condemn me. Did she ask for an AT evaluation? Did she ask for something related to technical stuff? Did she ask for help on how to help my child read?
She more wanted understanding, right? That she is trying, that her child has struggles, but it's not her, that he's not being, they're not trying to provide her needs.
Right. Judgment-free zone. That's what she wants. When it comes to behavior, and we know it's hard not to judge.
I think the video also speaks a little to stigma that families and students and youth feel as well when they're dealing with behavioral health or mental health needs from other people viewing them. She mentioned about being at the grocery store and having to explain or not wanting to have to explain to somebody what's going on. with her child. So that's also a big factor too, I think.
And I can relate to that. I'm a parent of 10 kids, 5 boys and 5 girls. I have a daughter who was born 1 pound 2 ounces at 21 weeks gestation. And I remember after 9 months of her staying in neonatal, living in neonatal, bringing her home, and this was my first child, being so proud of being a dad, and then having to face that first question from somebody in my community. We are out at a restaurant, a community restaurant, eating breakfast, and one of the staff who thought they were familiar enough with me to ask me the question, "That's your daughter? What's wrong with her?" That weight, that stigma, and you know, I'm a big guy, I can handle stuff, right? But the emotional regulation it took for me not to cross her up. I said, nothing, she's 3 years old and she's my daughter, maybe that's what's wrong with her. But, you know, that's what you have to learn to put up with sometimes, and it shouldn't be like that. Just like the mom said, I just want someone to ask me, what can I do to help?
So one of the practices you can think about is really starting the conversation with that question. What can I do to help? Don't you know that, right? We all know this. When you get that phone call at home, we know that they know what we're going to say. They know what we're going to say. But surprise them and say, how can I help you? What would you like? Take like 1 extra minute to start the conversation like that, also in your PBT meetings, because this is about someone's child.
And I can say I have 10 children. 4 of them received special ed services, and 1 received medical accommodations. My daughter that was born 1 pound 4 ounces, her name is Christ. Accessing services for her were totally different than accessing services for my sons that were diagnosed with ADHD, that didn't look like they had a disability. Like my daughter, overtly, she had limited vision and what have you, and some of her low birth weight, the scars from her low birth weight were apparent on her. My sons came in the classroom, smart, witty, maybe a little bit too smart and a little bit too witty. Look totally different, and accessing those services and getting people to appreciate the differences in their diagnosis, in their ability, in their tolerance, totally different.
Right. Because we believe that every single family functions as a home learning environment, right? Regardless of their economics, their race, their culture, their ethnicity. And we believe that every family has the potential to support and improve the academic achievement of its children. We believe that, but do we walk this talk? Let's be honest, like if you have a kid in the classroom who has ADHD, because I hear this all the time, and I was a teacher, right? And like, you know, you have to teach all of this stuff, right? And there's this kid, his son, right? With that smart and witty mouth, right? What do you think of right away? We might think of like, what are you doing with your kid? I'm gonna call your dad right now.
Or even, we're so glad that you kept your son home today. He doesn't have to go on this field trip with us.
Right. How engaging is that, right? How do we then believe that every family has the potential? Because they do. It's going to be different for everybody, right? It's not going to be the same. And to that, we want you to think about it from this perspective. This is what we call the Courageous Conversations Compass. We use it when we're talking about hard conversations. We started using it when we talk about race, right? Conversations about race. But I love this when it comes to working, and even at a PPT meeting, or even having a conversation with someone that you might be having conflict with, right? So the compass says that we need to be centered in order to have an effective conversation. But we all enter from different quadrants. So some of us will enter from the emotional quadrant. This is my kid you're talking about. This is very emotional, right? Some of us, the school might enter from the intellectual piece. There's data here that we have. We need to show that data because this is what the child has, right? And some of us might enter from the hands and feet, relational. We want to do something about it. And some of us will enter from the moral. So the mom was a Colombian mom, and she said that the school, she was very emotional because the school told her that she should medicate her kid. Because according to them, he had ADHD based on the data. There's a couple of issues wrong with that because a teacher shouldn't be prescribing medication, right? But she was here. Rightly so, right? And they were here. So they need to be centered in order to understand where the mom is coming from when it comes to her kid. And if they don't, we're going to have conflict. We're never going to talk to each other. So in your example, right, when you enter, talking about your sons, at the beginning, I'm sure you enter here on the emotional side. Because ADHD.
Like I said, I've had a myriad of PPTs, and all of them different. But I entered on the emotional side, and a little bit about myself. About 20 years ago, I started this work. It was my daughter. Went to due process because they wanted her to go to a school 4 blocks away from the school she was in. I didn't think it was necessary. I think that she had, I was in the impression that she had gained community and friendship with kids that she was in that school with, and she should have the opportunity of graduating with those kids at the end of the year. Well, I didn't realize that that school, because it was one level, got an disproportionate number of ambulatory kids who had ambulatory issues moving around and couldn't do well in schools going up and down stairs or what have you. So this school had an influx of kids with special needs. And the principal did her best to kind of level that out and where she could send kids. I was thinking about myself and my situation and my daughter, and not the whole picture. But with that, I went to due process, got my behind handed to me, and I started to learn more after that and started to appreciate every quadrant, every angle, and every position around that PPT table. And next time I asked, I had the thinking quadrant, I had the data, I had the rationale, I knew how to act at the table. I didn't tell the principal to get out of my meeting. My emotions were regulated, and the morale piece was there. And I received everything I wanted. My daughter was placed in a special program out of district, and I was looked at more as an ally and somebody they could come to as a partner in the district rather than a disgruntled parent. And I think the latter is less beneficial, being a disgruntled parent and appreciating all sides is we get a lot further down the road with that.
I think it's also important to note that when we work with families through our work at Favor, that a lot of times we will meet them at this emotional phase, and that's okay. It's okay to be emotional if you're talking about obviously your children, that's going to happen. What we try to work on with families is we talk about a continuum of pain to power. So taking that pain and using that pain to be able to channel it, as Beresford mentioned, emotionally regulating that emotion, and then being able to use that to be able to tell your story or build that relationship with whoever you're working with, whether it's a school staff or a clinician or whoever. And I think also on the flip side, when we're talking about building relationships it's okay for a quote-unquote professional, because I think we're all professionals in some sense, of being able to share that, you know, I might have gone through this, or I am also a parent as well. So being able to build those relationships and build that trust from a common experience too.
And for me, going through that process, I discovered allies. And the biggest surprise to me is my greatest ally came from across the aisle. Someone from central office, someone from Department of Special Education that, you know, told me, contact the State Department of Education. They have guidelines that they come out with every other year. That CERC was a bevy of information, and I educated myself. And I looked within myself and realized that the non-confrontational, non-contentious approach would yield me better results.
But it took somebody from the school helping him and offering that information. And that's the piece sometimes that we forget to do, right? So let's go a little deeper. What do you see here in the first picture? He cannot see, right? Think about us three, right? That'll be me. Like, you don't need a box. You don't need a box. What about here? What happened?
That's equity.
So let's go further. What did they do here? Remove the barriers, right? You know, I sometimes think that this is kind of common sense, but it's not.
Common sense is not that common.
Right? Because when we talk about equity, it is about access, right? Remove those barriers. It is about providing what they need. So what does each family need in order to empower them to be successful and not stay in the emotional quadrant and have conflict? So my colleague at work, one of them said to me the other day, and was saying to participants, that if you go and Googled, you could see the due process hearings for the state of Connecticut. I believe we're top 5 in the nation, small state, top 5. Think about that. And you read the hearing and why they're going to due process is all about this, empower. It's about access and not understanding that big picture. Because we know that in special education or in anything you do, I'm just using special education today, anything, what we do, how we see the world, it is about that culture that we shared. That is implicit and explicit rules that express my beliefs, the goals, and the values of different people. It is about that. So in English, you say, and I always love this saying that because I still trying to figure it out, right? It's like someone said to me, what am I, chopped liver? And I was like, why can't you just say you're chopped steak? What is that implicit shared belief about? Why chopped liver?
Because I'm not a fan of liver. I used to joke and say, liver worse, how can you make it taste worse?
Oh, okay.
Put it in a spread, right?
So think about special education. Think about when you're working with families, what kinds of things you assume that they should know. Right? So you assume maybe perhaps all of us, and I'm going to include myself, all of us assume that they should have known what their diagnosis is, and they should know what that means, right? And they should know all of these things, and they should know they should come to school. They should know they should get involved. Well, they don't. Maybe I know, maybe you know, because that's how your parents raised you. That's what you saw your parents do.
And how many of you have to face that irate parent that comes to your place of employment and say, I leave my kids with you 30 hours a week. I expect not to get a phone call on my job, not jeopardizing my employment Don't call me anymore, handle it.
I mean, we do, right? Yeah. All the time, right?
That used to be me at 6'6", 300 pounds coming in upset, you know, giving you guys dirty looks and what have you. But I learned, you know, a better way to attract flies or bees or whatever.
Because think about that, right? Because he has some implicit rules that he expected you to know. He expects you to know when that phone call was made to the teacher, was like, what do you think? Like, I can just drop everything and go? And maybe the teacher is saying, what does he not think? Like, this is his kid we're talking about. Because it's really about how we see the world, right? It's about those assumptions and interpretations that we make. And this is where conflict starts when it comes about engaging families. And I think the MTSS framework offers you the opportunity to really reflect in all of these things. Because you're going to differentiate for what families need. Because maybe, just maybe, had I asked him about, tell me when I can meet you then. What is the best option? What is a strategy that I can use? Because do you realize that I really would like to talk with you because you are the expert in your child and I'm not. That might have changed the conversation.
I also think it's important to note, I like that definition of culture because culture can mean many different things. Obviously, your ethnicity, your race, but it also can mean things like your religion that plays an impact, or maybe it's within your neighborhood, your particular school. So even different homes, you know, what your culture is in your home may be totally different from what my culture is in my home. So thinking about culture being in little pockets that people have within their lives as well. Right?
And language also. And not just the narrow perspective of, well, are you bilingual? Do you speak Spanish?
Right.
Do you speak school?
Right.
Do you speak DCF?
Right.
Do you speak juvenile justice? Those languages, that's means of communication. The words and the phrases they use are totally different. Some of them are the same and have different meanings. You'd be surprised. And for a state that has a history of its systems, especially its systems that work with families and children, don't communicate with one another, and they speak a different language.
So it's bigger than just a translation, right? Think about it.
It's interpretation.
Right.
Translation,
Right.
interpretation.
Because sometimes that's the thing that we assume. So family engagement, this is how we view it, right? It's ongoing and it's strengths-based and it's goal-directed. There's a goal, there's an intentionality behind why I'm engaging his family. It's reciprocal and culturally responsive. It's both of us coming together to the table and doing this for our children, for our kid, for my kid, right? Support what's best for the children. And it's a process of communication and decision making that does not stop, it's continuous, right? Because that's what it is about, and it's about equitable access. So when families, especially sometimes families who come from other countries that do not have special education services or really understand disability to mean something different, we honor that perspective. It doesn't matter whether I think it's right or wrong, because I'm still going to engage that family. All we have to do is understand that we have to be from the strengths-based. So when a mom calls me and tells me in Spanish, my kid has a little bit of autism, I say, okay, sure, right? What am I supposed to say? No, but you know, some might say, well, no, you know, that's not true. It's not my job. Whatever I think right here, I say to myself in Spanish, cállate la boca. It's not your problem, right? Let her say that he has it. Because I want that trust. That's what's important. That's when we start thinking about family engagement.
And I think being strengths-based is really, to me, that stands out as being one of the most important things on this list. When you can look at something and definitely pull out the positives, we actually, at Favor, we do a presentation. We actually go in and train incoming social workers at DCF, the Department of Children and Families, and we show this slide to them. in which it's a house, it looks a complete mess, and we ask them, what do you see in this picture? And we hear chaos, dirty, a mess, and it is, it's all of those things. But when you look closely in the picture, you also see there's food there. It's probably a two-parent household because dad's probably employee has a lunchbox coming in. There's pictures all around their house. So in the midst of that chaos, no matter what's going on, that always we can find strengths there. And I think that's really important, no matter who you're working with, that you can always pull out strengths.
Right, and so when you're working with kids who have behavioral challenges, sometimes it's hard to find something that's strengths-based, right? Let's be honest, right?
Especially if there's an irate parent coming in and all you hear is negative, 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 negative. Sometimes we have to put ourselves in the position of the parents. When they come into a PPT, usually the first 15 minutes to 45 minutes, they're hearing all the bad things that their child has done, all the bad presentations, what their child is not capable of doing. And I've also sat on juvenile review boards, and it would be so disheartening when you ask the question to a parent, what redeeming factors do you see in your child? And they can't answer one. That means they start believing what everyone else is saying about them and their child.
Right, because we don't have time, so we start the PPT with this is what's wrong with the child. Or we might say your child is great, but that's about it, right? We're not concrete when we work with families. So we want you to think about that type of communication. That's another practice. We have to always start from that strengths perspective because these are very emotional things. And we always have to try to find the good in everything we see. So why we do family engagement?
So I took from a slide that was prepared talking about the ladder of family participation, and what it speaks about on that ladder, on the lower rungs, where families are not that involved, that you have families manipulated, you have families seen or used as decorations, families used as tokens, and I can tell you, in my journey, my last 20 years, I've felt all those things, and sometimes I still feel like that, but I'm opinionated, and I'm a big guy, and I got a voice, so I don't let it stay like that. Families assigned but not informed, that's like a PTO, and you have parents there, but you don't let them know you're not communicating what the real issues in the school are. You have them there for decoration, just to fill the box. Well, what I did is gave it a different perspective. I used a pyramid because in a lot of this work we like to use pyramids and say that, but this is the way I see it sometimes, that the pyramid is balanced on its head, where decisions are made by the superintendent, by the commissioner, by the governor, by whoever's in charge, and that's a narrow view. In that view, those individuals, as much as they want to do good work, they're not able to see the peripheral and how that peripheral affects the mass or the majority. So we right-side the pyramid and put it on its base. A school system should have, or schools should have, primary benefactors. Who should be that primary benefactor? Which population, what group of people?
Students.
The children, right? So then if you say that, then aren't you saying that the children or the kids or the families should be involved in that decision-making process? I'm glad I'm getting about it. So then families become full partners. And in partnerships, it's a shared authority and shared responsibility. When I start to think that I am responsible, then I embrace it a little bit more. And other than full engagement, engagement or involved, and I've had to define that before, and forgive me if I'm a little misogynistic, because in that explanation, I asked a crowd of mostly women, what would you rather do, be involved with a guy or engaged to a guy? And of course they said engaged. So then after engagement, what comes after that? Marriage. And in marriage is supposed to be a union, and a shared union where you have equal shared responsibility and authority. try to get a divorce, and you'll see that that's kind of true, right? So the pyramid representing Delta, also representing Delta, Delta representing change. We acknowledge that with change is usually accompanied by harm and inconvenience. Can we agree with that? Harm and inconvenience come with change, especially if you're not ready for it. Like when they increase our taxes, we're not ready. We're never ready for that. So we are obligated to not marginalize that harm and inconvenience, but minimize that harm and inconvenience. And when we deal with families, that's very important. And when you minimize it, right, not marginalize, when you minimize it, you start to achieve full partnership, which allows and encourages for full employment in the process. That's the terminology I like to use. Give me a hammer. If we're going to build a house, you give me a hammer, and I start doing some of that labor, driving those nails. When that house is done, I'm going to move into it. I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to make sure it is what it needs to be. In your communities, if you fully engage and fully employ your families in the process of sustaining a positive and fostering a positive school, community, environment, and relationship, I guarantee you those parents will be there giving you the support and the help you need, not only with their child, but with every child in that community and every child that you educate. So that's how we change that, and that's what we look at it. So if you ever asked about engagement, tell them Beresford Wilson said, fully employ them in the process. That way they encourage, they embrace it. That way they own it. And I think that's the best way to get results.
So we want you to think about this as a practice, right? Not only because IDEA said that you need parents as full partners, because you are going to think about the practice of shared decisions making.
Absolutely.
It's very intentional. This is very much intentional. It's hard to do, it's easy to say, but it's about that intentionality when you come to the table, right? Am I thinking that, when I come to the table, I say to myself, would that family feel manipulated if I act on this behavior, if I do X, Y, and Z? So how do I ensure really family participation that is not compliance, that is more than compliance?
And something that a lot of us worry about when we start to become more engaged with families, more intimate with families, is liability. This engaging families in this manner, fully employing them in the process, all right, shows them a process of decision making. Not only shows the community, but shows the higher ups that process of decision making is moral, it's viable, and it works. And it gives a school district, it gives you as individuals more credibility. You're not doing things in isolation. What did we say earlier? School systems, juvenile justice systems, these systems where children and families are the primary benefactors. In Connecticut, we have a history, and routinely, those systems don't talk to each other. So if they're not talking to each other, they're not talking to you as frontline workers, and they're not talking to the parents. And that automatically creates a climate that drives a wedge between us as parents and you all as frontline workers.
I think also, Nitza, you had mentioned that it's not easy, and it's not. It takes time, and I think a lot of times people have the best intentions of making this happen. You might have this great plan, this is how we're going to go through with it and have true family engagement and participation, but let's say that you have an event, a couple events at your school, and then families don't show up. And then for the next year, it's like, well, that didn't really work out, so maybe we should just pull back from that a little bit. So I say that to say that it takes time, it takes consistency, being able to do this over a long period of time until you really do see those results. So stick with it, and it will happen.
Right.
Routinely, it takes 3 to 5 years to change policy. Sometimes it takes a lifetime to change culture.
Right. So, I love when we come to the table and have that shared decision making and we are honest with each other. If we're honest with the families and say, I know what you want, or I understand that this might be something that you want for your child right now, but let's talk about our budget. I want you to see it from our perspective, right? What does that look like? Because families understand that, but we are afraid of saying that. We don't talk to each other, right? And in MTSS, one of the components is right there, family, school, and community partnering. It's really, really community partnering and really believing that they're equal partners at the table. Because I know my child best. I happen to think I do. And if you're a parent, don't you know your child best? There was a district in Connecticut that were suffering from behavioral, this teacher, they were having a lot of challenges, right? And this just happened. So I teach a class on culturally linguistically diverse students, and I send my students to go to a place they don't know. And you know, believe it or not, I have gotten people who want to go to Hooters. Hooters is not something you don't know. That does not count, people, right? So my student comes, right, and says, Professor, I got this down. I said, well, what did you get down? And she says, that call and response. So I went into the African American church like you gave me permission to, and I was there, and I started seeing what was going on, and I suddenly see the pastor stands up, and then the people respond, and all of that, and then it just hit me. I was sending a lot of kids to the office for behavioral challenges. And then I said, why? Because I thought they were not waiting their turn. And then I said, really? She said, it took that I figured that out, that whatever was said in the book, I never saw it because it wasn't part of what I am. So I just said, well, you're going to the office because I'm just tired of you. I'm asking you like not to interrupt, and you just have too much, it's a lot of ADD, whatever that means, right? So I'm just going to send you. And she said, no, I got it wrong. Is that true for every single case? No. But she stopped and she thought about that. And she said, before I even make a phone call at home, I have to figure why that student is doing that. Is it really a challenge with behavior? Because maybe, just maybe, that's what they do. That's how he is raised. So how do we come together instead of me making that phone call at home? All the time we're saying, you know what, let's refer this child because there's a lot of behavioral challenges. I keep telling Nitza to not interrupt, and she does. Go ahead. You're smiling. So think about that, right? Think about that kid. How many of us have done that? Have that child that says, you're interrupting. That's implicit. You're supposed to know that you don't interrupt when I'm talking.
But you fell into that child's culture. You gave an experience or a situation, and all that child is doing is responding to the way that he or she knows in their environment.
Right.
And environment is the leading influencer on culture, even to the effect of how we look, our physical attributes.
So think about that. So in our case, right, we want you to think about family engagement when we're having a hard time, sometimes engaging them. Think about and reflect, what do you think the problem is? Whatever it is, right? And in this one, it's going to be very open, right? And then you think about, why is this occurring? And what am I going to do about it? So let's think about an example. Does anybody want to share? I can think of many, but how about you share one from your son with ADHD? So what the problem was, or think about how many of you are having a hard time reaching out to their families, having them come in. When you call them, what happens? They don't pick up. Why don't they pick up? Why do you think they don't pick up? What's the problem?
Too many phone calls.
Too many phone calls? What else? Too many negative phone calls? What else?
Numbers change.
The numbers change, so if the number is not working, they're like, okay, I just saw the school call 5 times, I want to change the number,
How about,
right?
I just don't want to hear from you anymore.
Right. What?
You go to school for how many ever years to deal with this, and all I need to do is discipline my child, spank him or her, send him to bed early, or, no Disneyland or something.
Right.
I mean, if we do that, then every response that we give to our child is punitive. If we do that in our schools, then every response to our children, the children we serve, is punitive, even if it's graduated punity. And it's not adhering to IDEA when a child presents particular presentations that it should cue something like questions or an assessment or observation. And we miss that because this is what we're used to doing.
So think about that, right? In the problem-solving process of MTSS and engaging the family, when you make, using this as an example, when you make a phone call home and you have this little script that you're going to tell the parents something negative, what do you want them to do with that information? Somebody give me an example. What is it that you want them to do with that information now that they know that the child misbehaved? Maybe it's that, right? You gotta be creative. Maybe you calling them to say, I don't know how to do this, help me.
If I make a phone call to a family, I ask, has anything happened at home that we should be aware of that might be affecting their behavior? That's kind of how I.
Right.
Does this happen at home? Does this happen in the community? Try to find out where else it happens. It could be a stimulation issue. Maybe he or she, as a child, can't tolerate a noisy environment, and that just throws them off, and they don't have the emotional regulation to manage themselves in that environment. And, I mean, that happens to us as adults.
And I think if you approach the parents in a positive way to start, even though you have a negative situation,
Absolutely.
Right.
and approach them and try to do this and it's really worked well, with some tough situations, I know this is not what you expect, or, I know, and just let them know that you're there to support them. It's gone
Right.
a long way. The behavior can't happen, but I'm here to help, like you've already said, just to reiterate,
Right.
it really does
It goes a long way, right?
go a long way.
But sometimes we continue to admire the problem,
Yeah.
and we just don't.
And maybe they've had, unfortunately, an experience as a child
Right.
in school.
Right.
So school is just a negative
Yep.
place.
Yep.
So they bring that into adulthood. And
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I had some teachers that had moved on
teachers
to,
are friendly to them.
I had some teachers that moved on to administration who taught me, and now they're administrators of the school that my kids go to. And I remember you. That's your child.
So going to that, why has it been so difficult to cultivate these partnerships? What do you think? Anybody? You can throw any, something about problem-solving process. What do you think?
Lack of understanding.
Lack of understanding from each other. What else? Lack of focus on understanding that families and communities. Right.
And less social emotional development.
Right, social emotional.
Right, those things that are so important. Right?
I feel like there's just not a framework for it. So, teachers don't have a framework for doing this. There's not leadership at the top. So it's.
Right.
Does anyone think that it's budget and budget constraints contribute to it also?
It's more time constraint. So when we have that budget maybe and lack of framework, we seem to think that only if they come into the school, that's going to be the only way to engage them, which is not necessarily the case. Because if you are a teacher, how many of you want your parents to come into the classroom every single morning to tell you, what can I do for you today? Let's be honest. That is not what it is about. Right? And we seem to think that. So maybe the child who is having behavioral challenges, right, and the child is still not referred, maybe invite the parent, and after talking to them, is this happening at home, right? And say, can you come and tell me when I see him or her doing this behavior in the classroom, can you come and watch and just tell me, how do I help him or her? But sometimes we are not doing that, and we don't because of this, right? We feel insecure. We might feel fearful, right? We feel like, I've never done that. Like, why would I do that? I feel inadequate. And then I say, well, you know, he can do it. He's from Favor. Favor can do that. And then we are reluctant to make that phone call and invite that partnership.
And I think this works both ways too. I think this can work for the families as well, to have the fear and insecurity of being able to go to somebody at the school and ask them certain questions, especially if your child does have a behavioral need. I might be scared to do that, or reluctant to go to the school and ask for help or ask for something from them. So I think it definitely works both ways.
I can tell you as a parent of a child that was born 1 pound, 2 ounces, 21 weeks gestation. I said that, you hear me say it again and again. I was afraid. When they asked me, well, what do you think? What do you think your daughter's chances are? Because I asked them, give me percentages. Was she a 50-50? They told me 0-0. But before they said that, they asked me, what do you think? I said, she's beautiful, because this is my first child. I didn't go through this before. I didn't know what a sick, dying child looked like. They tried to get me to sign a do not resuscitate order for 9 months. 9 months of the 9 months that she was in neonatal. And I didn't know any difference. But, you know, what I knew is I love this child. This is my first child. When she heard my voice, she smiled. I wanted to have every opportunity to live. She's 28 years old now. About 6 years ago, she lost all her sight due to complications when she was, you know, a small sick baby. But she smiles. She can find her way around her house and her environment. She's loving. She has a quality of life that she deserved, and the fact that she deserved to live. But I can tell you something. My mother comes from a different, and my mother's passed away now 2 years ago, but she came from a different culture, in a different environment. And she would oftentimes say to me, are you sure you made the right decision in allowing your daughter Christ to live? And I said, absolutely. I said, though, I know that if she was born to you in Jamaica in the 50s or in the 40s when you started having kids, she probably wouldn't be here because of the different environmental and social stresses. So we have to consider that also in the decisions, in our decision-making process on how we respond to the needs of family and children. But Favor, as a statewide multicultural family support organization, we are obligated to have that be what we're beholden to. Parents, children, systems in Connecticut, and how we can make it better. How can we have sustainability in responding to children and families and what their issues are?
Right. So the approach we think of when we think about MTSS, same with family engagement, right? It's about that solving that problem, right? And we think about having it as a systems approach that is data-driven, that is collaborative, so there's really full partnership, that is relationship building, and that is empowering, and that is multidimensional and multi-tiered. Because not all families who have a child receiving a targeted intervention are going to respond to the same way that you work with that other family. So I might have a job and I can't come, so then can you send me progress reports through the text? Or just tell me, you know, your child did okay today. So you and I have this little code word that says, I'm not gonna get a phone call, you're gonna text me, and you're gonna say, my child did great. So then I know. Or maybe you're just gonna write there in the targeted intervention, you're just gonna say, these are the things that he or she did today. Same way with family engagement. We're going to view it as a systems approach. It's comprehensive. Go ahead.
And when we do it in a way that is considerate of the family and considerate of the school system, we're not always writing every day in a journal, because sometimes you guys don't have enough time to do that. And I can appreciate that as a parent. But communicate to me in a way that is most effective and as convenient as it can be for you, because it is never convenient for me as a parent to get that phone call from a teacher saying, I'm just so glad you left your son home today and not send him in on this field trip.
Right.
How's that allowed?
How is it allowed?
A teacher said that to you.
Oh, teachers have
Yes.
said it.
Oh, absolutely.
I got a phone call the other day that the child with behavioral challenges, the punishment was not to go on the field trip.
Oh, no, I understand that.
And-
But for the teacher to say it that way.
They have said it.
Absolutely.
I know you and I would not say it, so sometimes you go, are they in the right field, right? But
Not only my child, but I've heard that said about other children. And as an advocate, when I come to school, and the fact that I in my career had built positive relationships with school, and I made them feel comfortable enough where they could say that and not say, oh, stop, really? Well, let's work on, when that child comes back to school, a situation and environment that next time you go on a field trip, that's the first person you sign up for it. And maybe if you give that child some responsibility, like count the kids coming on the bus, so they feel included rather than excluded.
Right.
So it gives us time to look at our practice and how we communicate things, and that helps.
right, it's not what we said, it's how we say it. Because we want you to, in the tiers, right, we want you also to remember that families can do all these things, right? They're supporters of their children, they model that behavior, they're advocates, they're encouragers, they're monitors, they're decision makers, but we have to work with that. And we have to do it, and if we don't, they're not gonna know, because it's about both ways. And we put this up electronically, but one of the practice we want you to remember is that think about who needs the support. That all families may not need the same, regardless of how much, what intervention that their child is receiving. You might have a child who's receiving a targeted intervention, and the family, you might need to work closely with them, what I call an intensive one, right? Do you want to add anything? So we also want you to remember that power in communication, you have to balance that power. You have to build a trust. You have to look at all of these things, personal beliefs and values. What do I believe about that family? What do I know? And you have to, for me, this is a very important one. This gets you a long way. We can control that. Welcoming and caring environment. How do I help you today? What can I do to make your day better today? How awesome are you for really understanding that we need to do this together because you're the expert in the child? Starting from that perspective.
I can say that Connecticut is a unique state. It being the third smallest state in the union, we have affluence right next to abject poverty. I live in Hartford. We have a street in Hartford, probably is the most affluential street in the state, Scarsborough Street. Less than 100 yards from there, we have a project. There's no reason why the kids on Scarborough Street access services or schools or supports that the kids 100 yards away from them can't access. That is ridiculous. We have some of the best and highest academic achievers in the country in this state, and some of the lowest. That makes no sense. We have two different systems. One for those who can pay for, Cadillac services, Rolls-Royce services, and then one for the rest of us. I can tell you the narrow look, the narrow perspective that those at the top have that allows for this doesn't show them the peripheral in how that type of system impacts them also. It impacts, when the least of us don't do that well, it impacts us who do well also.
Right. So we want you to remember when we have a system of MTSS, similar process you do with your students, right? Look at it from that perspective with families, that system is comprehensive and that framework is there. Your practices are going to change and you're going to have equitable access for all. and you're going to create a system that provides that trust, respect, and equity for all of our families, because it's going to help us reflect on what the problem is, or what do I believe the problem is, and how do I make it better for both of us. So we want you to remember that. We need to clarify how we, the stakeholder, define the word all in success for all. Sometimes these beliefs are not consistent. So sometimes our family engagement system is not consistent with a truly inclusive system that affects all actions and outcomes on how we do work with families.
And I would say, in that vein, a family that is informed, a parent that is informed, an individual, a child that is informed on the process and learns and knows the process usually has better outcomes. And learning is as much a process as anything else. A lot of people think it depends on the content. I think it depends on learning the process.
Right, because that's what it is about. Parent-professional relationships are important because they are needed to provide the cultural perspective that we, the schools, may lack.